Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome guests. It was March of 1997. I was the president of my homeowners association, and we had an annual members meeting of the entire membership of the association. My job as president was to run that meeting. Well, you ever have that moment when you get up in front of about 40 or 50 people and your brain just leaves town? That's exactly what happened. I went totally blank, had no idea, I couldn't remember my name. So I turned to my board of directors, and fortunately one of them was a Toastmaster. And she came up, took over the meeting, and I sulked back into the back of the room and just watched the whole thing go on. Well, she was a Toastmaster member of this club. And she said, "Doug, you ever heard of Toastmasters?" I said, "Yeah, I actually had. My dad had been a Toastmaster when I was a kid back in the 60s. And I remember him dressing up in his suit and having his little 3x5 cards and going off to give speeches." So I knew that Toastmasters existed. She said, "Well, why don't you come? We have a club that meets on Tuesday nights at 7:15. Why don't you come next week?" Okay, what have I got to lose? So I walk in the door. Has this ever happened to you? Someone invites you to an event and then they're not there? She wasn't there. But I walked in the door and Gary Drum, I will never forget my first night. He was the president of the club at that time, and he met me at the door and he welcomed me in, introduced me around, and I sat down and I watched this meeting. And I remember seeing the agenda and the times on the agenda. Everything was so well organized, and then the speakers got up, and this guy, I can't remember his name now, but he got up and he was giving his 10th speech, and that was it for him. He's going to give number 10, and he was done with Toastmasters. He gave this great, big, wonderful speech about how he'd grown and learned and all this stuff, and I'm sitting there going, I will never be as good as that guy. And he's only given 10. There were people there who had given many more than that. But I stuck it out. I met Marion Keibel, and she told me something that stuck with me, and Monica can attest to this because she was there too. Marion said, "Tuesday nights are sacred. When people ask me if I can come to a meeting or if I can do something, my answer is any night but Tuesday. Any night but Tuesday," and that stuck with me. Tuesday nights became sacred, and I came here every Tuesday night unless something was really bad. I was on vacation, I was sick, I was dead. Something had to be really big going on to keep me from Toastmasters. That's my first piece of advice for the new folks. Make Tuesday nights sacred. Make it a point to be here. Because the program won't work for you unless you're here to work the program. First time I did table topics, scared to death. Now I love them. What happened? I did them. I just did Toastmasters. I forced myself to get up here and do table topics. And I changed my attitude. I changed my attitude from being deathly afraid of table topics to loving table topics. It's like when I get called to jury duty. The best way to get out of jury duty, try to get on the jury. One of the lawyers will throw you off, no problem. So I love table topics now. And this showed up later that year. I was back at a board meeting. We had another membership meeting in November. I wasn't running it this time. I let somebody else do it. But the guy who was in charge, our board member who was in charge of Neighborhood Watch, couldn't stay for the meeting. So he walks over with his folder, hands it to me, and says, "Here, Doug, give him my report." Now, before Toastmasters, I would say, but because I'd done table topics, I opened up his folder, which really had very little in it. And I got up and I gave about a 2 to 3 minute presentation on the state of Neighborhood Watch in our neighborhood, just based on a few things that he had written down there. Could never have done that before Toastmasters, ever. Now this may come as a shock to some of you. I'm really a very shy introvert. And my wife here will attest to that. When we used to go to meet her, she's much more social and gregarious than I am. She walk in a room, everybody's her friend in about 10 minutes. We would go to her friends' parties. Her friends would have like big Christmas parties, birthday parties, Halloween parties, whatever. And she'd be off, talking and chatting with everybody. I knew no one except her. And I would sulk off in the corner and just kind of, oh, there's food, okay. Well, we had a Christmas party we went to after I joined in March, and this was in December. And I all of a sudden started talking to people. And we got home and she goes, who are you? What have you done with my husband? So that was a big change for me. Toastmasters really pulled me out of my comfort zone, got me to be comfortable talking to people, standing in front of an audience. And I remember that fear that I had, I'll never be that good. I remember when I started a job about that same time frame, and there was another lady who had been there for 10 or so, 15 years. She was just like on a keyboard, just 10 keys by touch, just going crazy. I'm just looking at her, I will never be that good. Well, right before I retired from that job a few years ago, I was doing the same thing. 10 keys by touch, I was flying on the keyboard. My bosses were impressed. I took a typing class in college, thank God I did, because now I can actually use a keyboard. I don't know when it happened, but it's somewhere along the line, somewhere just doing that same thing and just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, I got better. And it's the same thing with Toastmasters, with speaking. Somewhere along the line, I just got better and better. And I had help with that. This club. There were so many people that have helped. And a few of them are, of course, not with us anymore. I mean, they're not members of the club. There's a couple that actually are not with us. Tevis Thompson, the late, great Tevis Thompson, he's actually really not with us anymore, but he was a huge help. He actually joined the club 6 months after I did. But he just was one of these guys that just set goals. I mean, he would just set goals. And he just jumped way ahead. And he got to the point where he couldn't just give 5 to 7 minute speeches. He had to give longer speeches. So he joined 3 or 4 different clubs where he could give more speeches more often and finally get in the advanced manuals. And for you new people, the manuals are all gone, but this was back in the ancient history. We always had these manuals. And all of a sudden, he became a distinguished Toastmaster, which was the highest level you can reach. And then he did it again. I think he did it like 3 times or 4. I don't know. The guy, he was just a machine. But he always took time to help people and teach people. He's a great guy. So it was people. It was people in this club. It was Marion. It was Monica. It was all of you have helped me with evaluations and pushing me a little bit to get out, to serve as a club officer. Speaking of club officer, I've done them all. I'm warning you, Sergeant at Arms is the gateway.
Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, that's the gateway. That's where they hooked me. I've been a Toastmaster about 3 months when they said, hey Doug, you have military experience, why don't you be a Sergeant at Arms? Okay. Well, from there, it went to Vice President of Membership, then Vice President of Public Relations, and I really tried really hard many years to avoid Vice President of Education because that's a tough one. They finally caught me about 10 years ago. But, yeah, it's a tough one, but if you just stay on top of it and Confidence Builders provided the templates that I needed to do the grids and the availabilities and all these things. All this was there. There was help. Anytime I became an officer, there were 3 or 4 people that had been that officer. And if I had a question, they were right there to help. So it was great. Don't be afraid to be an officer. I've been Sergeant at Arms, President about 3 times, 4 times. Vice President of Public Relations, Vice President of Membership, Vice President of Education like 3 or 4 times. They hooked me into being a division chief judge at one point, which was just real fun. But actually it was fun, because I traveled all around the district attending all these contests as a chief judge. It was a lot of fun. Then I became a division governor. In those days they called governor, now they call it director. They changed the nomenclature to make it more business-like. But it was, and she'll tell you, I was never home. I was traveling all over, going to all these contests in the spring and the fall. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I just learned how to do things. Evaluations always scared the heck out of me. Still do. Still the most nervous thing I ever do is evaluations. Giving positive, constructive feedback to help people grow. It's a huge responsibility, and I take it very seriously. And I really appreciate the feedback that I get from my evaluators. It helps. When you listen to what people are telling you and incorporate it in your speech, it really helps. And that's all those evaluations, everybody who's evaluated me in the past, I'm a product of their input to me. So don't be afraid to give an evaluation. It takes practice, it takes time. But that's another skill that Toastmasters teaches you, is how to listen. Because when you're evaluating, you have to listen very carefully, and you have to pay attention. You have to observe what they're doing. So it's very important. Competitions, I mentioned. Don't be afraid to enter competitions. The worst that can happen is you lose. So what? You might win. And if you win, you might get lucky enough to go on that big stage in front of the conference of 200 or 300 people. That's only happened to me once, but it was so much fun. So don't be afraid to compete. And competition, especially when you do the evaluation contest competition, you get to hear other people's evaluations if you're lucky enough to be the first one to give the evaluation. And you can hear what other people saw and see if you saw the same thing they saw. It's kind of cool. Big thing is just be constantly learning. I've been just the whole time I've been in Toastmasters, just constantly learning, constantly paying attention, watching other speakers, seeing what they do, watching mannerisms, learning to move around the stage. I'm still a little touchy with that one, but it's getting better, getting better. My note now in conclusion to the new members. When you see the people who've been around a while, and you think, oh my God, I'll never be that good. Yes, you will. You will be that good. Just need to stick with it. Practice. At some point, you probably won't even realize it when it happens. You will be. And somebody will be saying, I want to be like you someday. Just don't